Because of the time, and I know Ramadan, I think I'm going to shortcut everything, give much more time for them and then for the questions. Now, again, thank you very much. We appreciate your time. Matthew just arrived from Sudan just now, right?
Yes.
So you have the most fresh. Do you know what the agreement going to happen tonight or not?
Inshallah.
Inshallah. So I will make it very short. They're going to tell us about the status. Abdullah is the representative of the UNICEF in Sudan, and Matthew is the country director for World Food Program. So I think they got much. And I'm also very pleased. We have Faris. Where is Faris? Faris Al-Noor. He has been مع الاحتسام يعني for a long time. So also we can get more up to date from him. So I'm going to make it short. So Mr. Abdullah, thank you very much. This is not the first time. We're very grateful for your time. If you can start, I think rather than I make any introduction, it's better. And tell us what is the latest status you wanted in Sudan, and what's important for us is what actually is the role we can play after you finish as a diaspora. What can we do to help our kids in Sudan after you finish your talk? Yes.
No, thank you very much, Ramadan Kareem. It's every time I come out of Sudan, I'd like to come and talk to Sudanese outside. The question always is the same. First, what is the UN doing in Sudan? Why the UN is silent in some of the human rights abuses? Why the UN is not more efficient? All legitimate questions. As you know, the UN is a bureaucracy. Bureaucracy guided by 192 or even 200 countries. So we're not the most efficient. But without the UN, many of the things that are happening in Sudan would not happen. So let me just give you an example of just the last 2 months, what the UN has been doing, but also particularly what UNICEF has been doing. When people were going في قيادة العامة on 6th of April, UNICEF with Minister of Health, we were in the field vaccinating children, measles. As of today, 10 million Sudanese children were vaccinated in 16 states of the country during this crisis. We have now Al Jazeera and Madani remaining, and we have about 3.5 million children who will be vaccinated over the next 2 months. So yes, it's true that we are not as vocal as we can and should be about particularly child protection, particularly human rights, but also in the context of where we were living, you have to prioritize the access you have to millions of children vaccinating or sometimes making statements. So there is that balance that we always don't get right. This year, we're facing significant risks, particularly with related to food security, and Matthew will speak about that. Already a study we did on malnutrition in the country, we find significant malnutrition, particularly in the east of the country. And actually we're now focusing particularly in Kassala and Red Sea states where we find a lot of gaps. The country went through economic crisis from last year. No matter who comes to the power in Sudan, whoever is there needs a lot of support. The Sudanese diaspora, you've been able to help what's happening in Sudan. It's because of actually those people who are in Riyadh al-Amma are there because of your support, your advice, your financial and others. But Sudan actually will need you even more, your skill sets. I don't think there's enough resources available from the countries, including your country here in the UK. So you will need to be able to influence your government here, your members of parliament, your House of Lords, to make sure that Sudan is not forgotten. That's what we're doing part of our visit. We're talking to DFID and the Foreign Office. Then we go from here and go to Brussels to talk to the EU. Then we go to Berlin to tell them the following. Sudan is too big to forget because, God forbid, something happens to Sudan. The entire region, the world will pay the price. Sudanese people have shown courage, have shown determination, have shown creativity to arrive where they are today. You need to support them. Sudan has not received development funding for decades. But today, humanitarian crisis is looming because of food prices and the way they are. And Matthew will talk about that. Last year, we were able to bring about 300,000 to 400,000 children back to school. Still 3 million children out of school in Sudan. To this day, 3 million children out of school. 2 million children are malnourished. Over 550,000 children are stunted. 10 million Sudanese don't have access to proper facilities, toilets, and potable drinking water.
Sudanese or children?
Sudanese.
Sudanese, okay. Okay.
But again, majority are women and children. Sudan hosts 1.2 million refugees. 1.2 million refugees. Yet Sudan does not get support from the World Bank and other bilateral because of the status of Sudan in the world. So we're hoping with this new change, things will open up. But that's not a guarantee, and it will take some time. So the role you play in the diaspora will be more significant than ever before. UNICEF, particularly, and I want to say just a bit and then I will stop because I think the engagement will be important. Over the last 5 months, we've been tracking the number of children killed, the number of children jailed. We've been sending letters to the government at the time, asking the status of children. I mean, for instance, up to this date, we have all the confirmed number of deaths. If you recall, Sudan Vision a few months back, UNICEF got strong response from the government because we were quite vociferous in our advocacy for children not being targeted during the demonstrations. But also, to be honest, we reminded parents to make sure that children are not, and some of the demonstrators, not to put children in the front, because we should not use children no matter who. We're concerned about children also in the armed groups, including rapid support forces, and we're working closely with them to make sure that that's not the case. So these are the kind of things that, as we speak, we're doing. This year, we have a program we're working on that will allow more children who are actually in the periphery, whether nomadic children, whether children, for instance, in an example like Hamish Koreb and other places, where actually we're bringing tablets. We're putting the curriculum in tablets so children actually have access to education in remote areas. So that technology is being brought to the most remote areas in the country, particularly on the focus of girls' education. This year, the world celebrates 30 years of the Convention of the Rights of the Child. Sudan is a signatory. Sudan actually signed in 1990 almost, I think. Almost every country has ratified this convention. So we want to make sure that this year, every child has an opportunity to go to school. Every child has a right to childhood. Every girl is not only bringing water from distant places, but also she's learning and she's contributing to society in a meaningful way. But all of this will not be possible if we don't have a government that's committed. So we're preparing actually as we speak files for the new government coming so that they prioritize these basic needs of children and families in Sudan. So that is another thing we're actually doing as we speak as a UN family we're preparing for. I will stop here maybe in the discussions we can talk in detail and the questions. But just to say, the United Nations family, we have been in Sudan since even before independence. UNICEF first program was 1952. And we have been there ever since. UNICEF actually graduates some of the most important people who came through the UN system actually are students of Sudan. Sudan actually was an institution for almost all the UN leadership that have gone through in the system. Because we've been part of that, unfortunately, because when the UN is there, that means there's a problem in the country. I hope there will be a day when the UN is not needed in Sudan, but that all depends on the Sudanese people. And Matthew can tell you actually the World Food Programme's plan to actually be out of Sudan if everything goes, because Sudan does not need food assistance. Sudan should be able to not only feed itself, but feed, if not the entire region, potentially the world. So with that, I will stop.
Okay.
And maybe
Thank you, Abdullah. Thank you very much.
where to begin. Just to add to one of the aspects that, before I talk more about the World Food Programme and food security and food-related issues in Sudan, the United Nations does have a special advisor in Sudan at this time, who is working very closely with the African Union on supporting what we hope to become an inclusive transitional government with a civilian nature that can then be built upon and give time for the free and fair elections, whether those elections are in 2 years or 3 years or 4 years or before 2 years, we wait and see. That's in the hands of the Sudanese. But to advise and support and provide guidance as we can, as the United Nations, but under the leadership of the African Union. Why the African Union? Because this is an African country that has African solutions, and the United Nations is not going to impose any form of solution on Sudan, but the United Nations will support any solution that Sudan can find to the problems it faces today. And this is very important. So the United Nations is not disengaging in Sudan. The United Nations is engaging, but very much in a partnership with the African Union. And that is our official position, I should say. The World Food Programme, of course, is a non-political entity, as is UNICEF within the United Nations system. And our mandate, our vision in Sudan is to not need to be there. Our vision in Sudan is not to be required to support communities in Sudan with any form of aid, but rather to support Sudan and the Sudanese people to build their own livelihoods, to build their own ability to be self-reliant, particularly in farming communities, so that Sudan can stand on its own 2 feet with regards to food security. We have a vision for that. We have a longer-term plan. I'll touch on that in a moment. But I would be wrong to tell you we are close, because Sudan has met many setbacks in the last years. As you're all aware, since 2011, there has been a decline in the Sudanese economy as the oil flows stopped, particularly when the war and the conflict started or reignited in South Sudan and the oil stopped flowing. But in the last 18 months, perhaps even 2 years, the economy of Sudan, as it were, fell off a cliff. So there had been a steady decline, but then there was a very sudden decline. You may have seen in some papers, I was interviewed about 6 weeks ago, in fact, probably the 12th or the 13th of April, where I made a statement, and I stand by that the doubling of the price of bread on January the 1st, 2018, was the straw that broke the camel's back for many families. Because the moment the price of bread doubled, the price of sorghum doubled. Now we're at a time where the price of sorghum in the retail markets, on the wholesale markets of Sudan, in Gaddarif, and just Gaddarif, but around the country in the periphery as well, is now 300 to 350% more expensive than it was pre-January the 1st, 2018. So trebling, quadrupling of the price of the mainstay of the diet of Sudanese people, because more people live and eat sorghum and millet each day and consume those particular cereals every day than any other product. So when the mainstay of your diet has gone up in price 3 to 4 times, your salaries have stagnated, the value of your currency has diminished, and the price of every other item, whether it's goat meat, sheep meat, chicken, eggs, or anything, vegetables, every single price of every single commodity and food type in Sudan has gone up. But that one indicator, that one example, the mainstay of the diet, 3 to 4 times more expensive today. That meant that in, of course, areas of Sudan that in the past had not felt food insecurity, people in some cases for the first time, could no longer afford to feed their families as they once could. Sadly, we are used, and Abdullah mentioned the 1.2 million refugees, we are used to supporting people who have been directly affected, impacted by conflict, whether they are displaced people within Sudan, displaced from the fighting in Nuba Mountains, displaced from the fighting in Blue Nile State, displaced from fighting in Jabal Mara, displaced from historic fighting in Darfur as a whole. We are used to supporting those people. We are used to supporting the people who have come from South Sudan because of the conflict since 2012. We're used to supporting people who are fleeing from Eritrea and the situation in Eritrea. But what we find now is that there is a situation where resident communities in parts of the Sudan that never needed assistance are now asking for assistance, demanding assistance, because they cannot afford to feed their families. 90%, this is a frightening statistic, 90% of all refugees and IDPs in Sudan, 9 out of 10 families, cannot afford to feed their family every day. 58% of resident communities cannot afford to feed their family every day. 3 healthy meals, 2,100 calories. 58%. That's a frightening thought. I mean, and this is countrywide. We're talking 18 states here. So the situation has really become worse and worse. Now, that's not the cause of the current political change. It didn't bring the winds of change. People have been calling for change for years, decades. You know that. I'm sure many of you have. But it is a symptom of the situation that people are facing today. And as Abdullah says, what's very concerning, as an embryotic, we hope, democratic, inclusive government starts to grow and strengthen, instead of growing and strengthening at a time when there is the fertilizer to make it work, where there is development, there is an economy that's functioning, there is an enthusiasm about change. They're actually coming into being at a time when actually the economy has never been so bad, when the situation for many families has never been so bad, when the need for this enormous deficit, this paucity of development spending is at its greatest and needed the most, and when the humanitarian needs are growing. So whatever this government looks like, as Abdullah said, whomever takes on the role in a transitional period and then at some point through an election, they're going to have a very difficult time. And our role as the United Nations, outside of supporting the burgeoning political process, is also to support people's basic needs from a humanitarian perspective and from a development perspective. So when you speak with your MPs in the UK and your MEPs, if you're voting in the European election, let's see what happens in the UK in terms of Europe, but this is a key issue for Sudan for the future. It must not be forgotten. Sudan is going to travel along a very rocky road in the next couple of years. And if the political changes are going to be successful, the economic, the social situation for people, the humanitarian situation for people in Sudan must not be forgotten. Now, I sound down, I sound a bit cynical and pessimistic. As I rightly started, we do have a vision, though, that WFP, the World Food Programme, the United Nations at large, the humanitarian organizations, can do ourselves out of business in Sudan. Certainly in the next decade, if not a little more. We, the world, not we, the UN, you as well, have the Sustainable Development Goals to work towards. All nations of the world, just about, have endorsed and have bought into the Sustainable Development Goals. Communities in Sudan have bought into the Sustainable Development Goals. One of the Sustainable Development Goals is to bring zero hunger, no hunger, by 2030. The reality in Sudan, as you well know, you have the blessing of 2 Niles flowing through your country, but you also have vast agricultural lands, pastoral lands, agricultural lands available to support food growth. Sudan today loses $1 billion in value of food every year post-harvest. This is food that Sudan grows and then is lost after the harvest time, due to insects, due to damp, due to rain damage, due to aflatoxin damage. $1 billion. Now, if we can turn that $1 billion loss into a zero loss, that food is surplus for the people of Sudan, which brings prices down, but for the people of the region as well. South Sudan is a potential $400 million market a year in food alone for the Sudan. Central African Republic, Chad, Ethiopia, and the broader region, all potential significant trade partners from an agricultural perspective with Sudan. And if we can harness that demand, and we can resolve issues with supply, we can guarantee farmers' profitability, farmers' incentive to continue to farm, and we can minimize this loss, bring down prices for the consumer, we can have a win-win-win situation in Sudan, I believe, easily by 2030. So a lot of the work we are doing today is moving away from perhaps the programs, the schemes you've seen in the past in Sudan, unconditional relief assistance, in-kind food which is imported from outside the country, to provide a stopgap for people today. Rather than work on those kinds of premises, we work on the premise that actually we want to build farming communities, agricultural communities, rural communities, ability to support themselves, be more productive, be more profitable in their work, so that they can feed their own families, but they can also feed the region. I'll stop now, and then I guess there may be some questions on
many questions
on different items. I would caveat, neither myself nor Abdullah are politicians. We are humanitarians. But there's a recognition, of course, you can't be a humanitarian without having some understanding and sensitivity on the politics that we are experiencing in the country where we work. So we will try, but I can't guarantee we can provide the solutions, but we may be able to provide at least some commentary on the way, the direction we see things going.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much, Abdullah. Before we open it to the people, I want to clarify one thing. You said by 2030 that could happen. What do you mean by Sudan poverty free, or we will realize the vision of Sudan become a surplus and a world leader in producing food? Which one, 2030?
By 2030, we hope that through our programs with communities in Sudan, that we can limit this $1 billion loss to a minimal food loss per year. That loss typically is experienced by small farmers, not by the large agribusiness.
Okay.
If we can change the situation for small farmers and small farming communities, we believe we can change the situation of food security for the majority of Sudanese people across the country.
Okay. Another question, it's not political, but this is going on. We know we all follow the media every day or every day and night. There is some people who start to talk about if this situation continue like this, we might end up in starvation. Do you really envisage that could happen? I know it sounds strange, but some people are talking about it now. If we are not producing in the next, I don't know, 3, 4, 6 months.
The political upheaval right now has not had a significant impact on production in the country. However, those symptoms I talked about, fuel scarcity, a lack of liquidity, no money in the system, those issues are having a direct impact on the productivity. If you can't get a loan from the bank to buy your seed, or to pay for your fertilizer, or to pay for your diesel to run your tractor, or to pay for laborers for that matter. If you can't find the funds or the fuel to do those kinds of activities, how can you farm? So it's not necessarily directly related to the political upheaval, but the symptoms we see in the economy are having an impact on food security and agriculture in the country.
Okay. Abdullah, just one clarification and we go. You said UN family is planning or you're already drafting something to give to the new government to take it forward. 2 questions. The first one, are you talking about the whole UN family, including WHO, all this one, or just you, the 2? Or the second one, is this is a blueprint or a strategy for humanitarian issues, or a strategy including the major issue for Sudan now, which is capacity building? Yeah. So are you giving them everything in that war, or just about humanitarian?
On the first question, actually it's the humanitarian resident coordinator who's compiling for the entire UN system.
Okay.
So that we have, first, because the new government does not know what the UN does, so what the UN does, but also what the UN is willing to do. It's a sort of an orientation, if you will. UN has spent on humanitarian development over the last 10 years over $10 billion. And I'm not talking about the peacekeeping. The peacekeeping has spent maybe $15 billion. So a lot of money. In some states, actually, the programs of the UN is larger than the states' Sudan government funding. So we, in this sense, we are preparing for the entire UN system, and actually under the leadership of the RCHC. On the second question
about capacity, is it include something like capacity
the UN,
building, or
the
just
UN the UN in many countries that go through transition does help things starting from rule of law, constitution support, constitutional writing, through anti-corruption, through elections. So the UN has programs that are available that could be brought to bear. But of course, that is at the wish of the new government coming. The UN will be ready to assist if they, so we will also be providing list of the things that the UN normally does. So that's the intention.
Okay.
And part of it, by the way, as we speak, we do work we did work and continue to work with institutions about capacity building, about upstream work. For instance, both of us are working on social protection issues with the Ministry of Social Welfare in terms of cash programming, how to improve the zakat system, for instance, in the country. So those will only get better because we will not have the difficulties we used to have in the past. That's our hope. It will be more transparent. It will be more accountable. Right? So this is the hope. And the UN will be there to help Sudan.
Okay, I will open the questions. So if you could kindly, whenever you ask a question, he or she come outside, because this recording is very important for the archiving. The second one, if you could make it, we have that one.
With a microphone.
Okay.
Just for the video.
The second one, if you could, because of the sake of the time and also of everyone here, make it as short as possible and right to the point. And the third one, with your, if you like, permission, I would like, if Faris, I want to put you in the spotlight, but Faris and Noor, you all know him. I just met him now. He came from Sudan recently. He's been every day and night in the Al-Ihtisam. So Faris, I don't want to put you in the spotlight, but would you like to come and start Faris? Not only the question, but to complement what they said, if you have any other things to add before you open the questions. Because you have been there in that fighting. Okay. So add whatever you like. I mean, I don't want to put you in the spotlight, but what else before we start questioning you think need to be taken into from these two gentlemen?
طيب بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أول شيء بحييكم جميعا.
الحتة اللي أنا عايز أضيفها إنه أكثر حاجة مخيفة بالنسبة لي كانت في الاعتصام أو في الفترة اللي فاتت دي، إنه نحن الآن سقوفات الناس ارتفعت شديد جدا. يعني الناس متوقعة إنه بسقوط النظام ده خلاص كل شيء كأنه الحل بيدنا، أو كأنه الحلول بقت سهلة جدا، ودي حاجة خطرة جدا. يعني حتى خطرة على الوضع الجاي، إنه التفاؤل الآن في تفاؤل أنا أفتكره مضر بالمرحلة الجاية إذا الناس ما قدرت تستوعب. إذا الناس ما قدرت تستوعب إنه نحن الآن بنعاني من التركة بتاعت الإنقاذ أو 30 سنة، تركة ثقيلة جدا. يعني إذا شبهنا البلد بعربية، الآن العربية دي سرقت المكنة بتاعتها والدركسون واللساتك وكل شيء، هي مجرد بوضي يعني. كويس. فدي نقطة مهمة جدا، إنه الفساد قدر إنه ينخر في عظم البلد، والبلد الآن هشة وممكن منهارة في عدد من حاجات. ويمكن التشبيه حتى اللي قالوا حميتي يعني قبال يومين مقبول يعني. كويس. إنه قال البلد زي الجلابية المشمشة، كان هبشتها من أي حتة بتنشرت. وده تشبيه يعني بغض النظر عن رأينا في الشخصية شنو، لكن تشبيه بليغ يعني فعلا يعني. فدي نقطة مهمة جدا، إنه نحن محتاجين أول شيء نوعي الناس بحجم المشكلة، وبأنه نحن عشان نطلع من الحالة دي محتاجين نصبر على بعض. فدي نقطة مهمة جدا. النقطة الثانية إنه الإشكال الحقيقي بتاع السودان، حتى نحن تعاملنا مع الأطفال، اشتغلنا مع الأطفال في المدارس. يمكن بدأنا عملنا شغل أقل من شغل اليونيسيف، لكن مبادرات بتوريك إنه المجتمع بخير. يعني إحنا قبل 8 سنة بدينا إنه شوفها في المدارس بيجوعوا بيطلعوا من التعليم. السبب الرئيسي للتسرب من التعليم في السودان هو الجوع، يعني حاجة ذاتها محزنة جدا. فبدينا مبادرة ب20 سندوتش. نحن بعد 8 أو 9 سنة قدرنا نقدم 49 مليون سندوتش في 123 مدرسة ل 35,822 تلميذ في السودان، وأنا بقول في الخرطوم كمان. يعني أنا اسمي فارس النور، واحد من الشباب اللي شاركوا في السودان. عندنا منظمة اسمها مجددون بنشتغل، وكنا جزء من الاعتصام، وكنا واحدة من المطابق الرئيسية. يعني كنا مسؤولين من الإدعام في الاعتصام، ولحد الآن الحمد لله مستمرين في إدعام الاعتصام. يعني النقطة اللي داير أركز عليها إنه المشكلة اقتصادية بالهنا الأول. يمكن الجوهر الكلام اتقال إنه الجوهر الرئيسي اقتصادي. فإذا نحن محتاجين نحن كلنا في الفترة الجاية نفكر في إنه كيف نربط المشاريع بتاعتنا بمشاريع تنموية. يعني مشاريع تنموية وتتربط. يعني أنا حتى التمويل، أنا هسه نحن عندنا مشروع اسمه إنسان بنمول الأسر، لكن بنربط لها إنه أنا بمولك عشان أولادك يقروا. إذا أولادك ما قروا، أنا التمويل واحدة من شروطه إنه الأولاد يرجعوا المدرسة، واحدة من شروطه إنه يصرف على الأولاد في المدرسة. حتى كفالة الأيتام ربطناها بالتعليم. فأنا أفتكر الفترة الجاية الناس محتاجين برضو يربطوا الأشياء مع بعض عشان يقدر الوضع الصعب ده نمر منه. وإن شاء الله يعني أفتكر بإعادة الثقة في السودان بالخيرات الكثيرة، ونطلع من الآن إحنا أفقر شعب في أغنى أرض. فسهل جدا إنه الغطار بتاع التنمية بتاعنا يمشي بسرعة ونرجع لعهدنا الأول إن شاء الله.
تمام فارس، شكرا لك يا فارس. يلا يا جماعه شكرا لك يا فارس. طيب يا جماعه عشان نوزع الفرص دي، انت كنت رايح عاوز زول قبل يا تعال بس نعذبك شويه تعلم هنا. عليك الله عرف اي ذول، يعني يا ريت انتروديوس يور سيلف عشان من ذاته زي نو هو يو ار واسك يور كويشن.
السلام عليكم، بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. انا سليمان ضرار. الحقيقه عايز اتكلم عن شرق السودان.
طيب.
You mentioned that there is malnutrition in eastern Sudan, particularly in the ما شغال ولا
لا ضرار هاك هذا. لا ده امسك ونوقف على التسجيل. معلش نعذبك شويه بس يتحملونا.
There is malnutrition particularly in the Red Sea area. Particularly there is about 20 villages displaced in the Red Sea and 45 villages in Kassala province. Okay, but because the people are poor, they cannot afford feeding their children. And there is the highest rate of infant mortality in the East Sudan. But you are here, you are dealing with the results and not the causes. For example, what I'm saying about the children, if the children are deformed because the mother is undernourished also.
Yes.
We have to look after the mothers. A lot of women in Eastern Sudan, they die either during delivery or after delivery from FMG and other things which you know. This is one. The other thing is about education. He said there is education. By the way, I was a teacher and I started visiting schools in 1960 with Sheikh Al-Gaddal, Saeed Al-Gaddal. And I visited all the schools in Eastern Sudan. One thing is that they are taught, the teaching is in Arabic, and the people, our people, they do not speak Arabic. We prepared 5 textbooks for teaching the children in Bija language, but that was banned by the government, saying that this is going to for separation.
سليمان معلش هذا قطعك بس تعرف انها كلها 15 minutes للناس دي كلها والله.
كويس okay. Okay. The other thing is that I'll go to the agriculture. I think livestock is more valuable than agriculture. And when the British left Sudan, 80% of the people in Sudan, they were nomadic people, and I think forests and livestock are more valuable, and people should concentrate on livestock in place of farming. Thank you very much.
شكرا لك. الأخت دي هنا لو سمحتي بس تعالي لنا هنا. أنا take and then you can reflect yes. امسكيهم الاثنين معلش. والله كلنا بنحاول هاي.
My notes.
تفضل عرفي نفسك.
سلامات. My name is Venus, and I can say that I'm a child rights enthusiast. My questions are for Mr. Abdullah.
Okay.
You talked about services provision, which is great. It seems like UNICEF is doing a lot of work in Sudan. If you can just talk a little bit about what are the strategic kind of plans that the UNICEF has to kind of support the child rights, especially during this transitioning period. What are the plans? You touched a little bit on advocacy, so if you can talk a little bit more about that and what are the plans just in terms of that. Just one other question.
Okay.
From your point of view, how is the current political situation and what's happening in Sudan is affecting children and will affect children in the long run, or will affect child rights, or
اوكي تمام شكرا لك. على كده كان يجي باصت لي يا عم دكتور فاروق ده. ايوه يا عم فاروق. ساعدوا عليك الله نبي الميكروفون ده. والله انجليزي is better عشان ما to pick you up برضه.
My name is Farouk Fadil. I'm one of the first people who immigrated from Sudan to greet my sin and the years in this country. I'm sorry I came late. I didn't mean to, but the description alarm was not. It didn't help me. Anyway, I think the worst thing that we are living in this peaceful and prosperous country and pontificate about what the people in the Sudan should do. That is wrong.
Okay.
I'm glad that you said, but I gather that you work in the Sudan, so you are entitled to. But we people who are living in this country, we have no right at all to tell the people in the Sudan what they should do, whether they are over-optimistic or not. They know what is happening there every minute, and they can hope they are the people to respond. The other thing, our only duty in this country is to send money to
help them. Yes.
Not course we go in demonstrations and God knows what. Yes, we chant and we shout, but the main thing that is not going to help the people in the Sudan. The main thing is to send money. Every event we hold, we must be a fundraising event, apart from the talking. The other thing is every one of us must lobby his local MP.
Well, they said that.
We did that in Oxford, and we are going to meet the Minister of Africans Department in the Foreign Office in a few days' time. And we're going to talk to her what we need in the Sudan and what we need here.
Okay.
So please lobby your local MP,
Yes.
and so that to raise the profile of what we are doing here and to help and obviously now what we need in Sudan is money, and
Yes.
so we have to contact the Secretary of State for financial development, because that's where the billions of pounds are spent on silly things when the Sudan needs every single penny. Please do that. Please do that.
شكرا
Thank
شكرا
you.
لك شكرا عدي سيف ده هنا كلامك ده all of it is in line with that's why we asked فارس لانه جاي من السودان و they were talking about the same thing. The real problem is money. Both all of us agree. يلا سيف سعيد.
Saif Bashir, thank you very much, and due to the constraints of time I'm going to be very short.
Yes.
I'll just ask you the things that you haven't said. Specifically, what have UNICEF done towards the killing of under 18s during the uprising, the revolution, since December until now? More specifically also, the killings of last week, in which the military council is involved. At least 3 children under 18 were killed. So what has UNICEF done? I know that UNICEF has the mandate to protect, report children according to Resolution 1612. In this regard, I would like also to ask about what UNICEF has done with regards to what Hamiti is doing, recruiting children under 18 from Western Sudan and take them to fight in Yemen, a war that Sudan has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with. It's just one of the things that that defunct, corrupt regime has involved our own country and innocent people who die therein.
We just take one last question. We'll give them a chance to answer.
Assalamu alaikum wa
عليكم
rahmatullah.
السلام ورحمة الله.
Thank you for coming here, and thank everybody that is joining this day. Regarding kids,
عرف نفسك يعني عشان هنا.
طارق إدريس كنت رئيس اتحاد الجاليات العربية في هولندا. What I like to say, always we have promises from United Nations, from United Emirates, from United States, but the reality is different. Always when we work in Sudan, we are like 100 years back compared with other countries. And always we hear in the news, some organizations, some societies, they support Sudan. But the reality is zero, especially for kids, especially for clean water, education. There are zero education in Sudan today. I have my high school in Hortagat. I think it's one of the famous schools in Sudan. And we supposed to have food 3 times a day. And they support us for education and for healthy. But today, 100% in Sudanese village, Sudanese cities, there is no any food, there is no any clean water. That is, I think, shame for all human beings, for all humanitarians. And that is not humanitarians for all the world, especially the UN and people that are educated, they know what's going on in Sudan. And besides that, there is many corruption. This country, they have been corrupted like 30 years. Where is the United Nations? Where is the human right? We have been 30 years in very close circle with this very bad government. We never hear about this. We never hear in our history. It cannot be, this is not humanitarians. So what I like to say, you promise, so you have to keep your promise. Because when you promise, we're waiting for your action. And there is no action, we will feel disappointed. So please, if you promise, make sure that you keep your promise. Thank you.
تمام يا طارق شكرا لك. Do you want to start first, Abdullah? Okay, I will hold it for you. Just go on.
All valid points. Just one thing to clarify. The United Nations is intergovernmental organization, which means we're accountable to governments. As I said, 200 countries are our board of governors, so bureaucracy is always a... Actually, until about a month ago, less than a month ago, Sudan was the president of the executive board of UNICEF. A year ago, Sudan was actually the executive board president of WFP.
Member, not president.
Member. But they were not...
They're a member, yeah. They're a member.
So we are government institutions, but we don't replace governments. We cannot be government. I mean, I mentioned that in some states we actually have more budget than the government, so therefore we play a lot role, but we cannot replace, we're not a government. There were cases where the United Nations run governments like East Timor during the transition, Kosovo during the transition, 1950 to 60, my birth country Somalia was under the transition of the United Nations, but those are rare. So there is a government, bad or good, so we have to be mindful of that. Just the example of the East, I can tell you this, we have programs that are, we call the first 1,000 days of a child's life. Even folic acid for mothers is distributed. But the resources we have are so limited that we target only the most needy of people. In the East, we have problems with social behavior. People don't eat eggs, people don't eat fish, people don't eat a lot of things. So we also work on this issue of the social norms and what are the nutritional aspects. But again, this is a question of resources. But I can assure you, we have programs that address some of the most needy people, including, for instance, distribution of folic acids. If you go to certain clinics, we have the distribution of folic acids and things like this. Strategic plan, I mean, it's a public document. UNICEF has a 4-year plan for Sudan. It talks about child protection, and I will link it with the issues related to child rights. For instance, Sudan was listed until recently as a country that recruits children for war. The Sudanese military was listed by the United Nations as a country that recruits children in the armed. Sudan was delisted only last year. Sudan is under probation now, and we're actually observing. We visit, I can tell you, we visited and opened the books of RSF, Tamasari. They've opened their books to us. We went through their recruitments. Even when they're graduating, we visit. RSF became members of the Sudanese military through Act of Parliament beginning of January, I think January 2017.
Abdullah, sorry to interrupt you. When you visited and they opened the books, what did you find?
What we found actually is that because now they're following the Sudanese Army's procedures, and therefore 18 years is the legitimate time to recruit children. We're helping them with age verification because some families, their children are poor. They would say the child is 18 years old just to be recruited because they want to earn money. When they're not. Yeah. So we're helping them with age verification. So we're doing that as we speak. And actually, we have written, when the news came out about recruitment for Yemen, we sent letters to them. We've been engaged with them, and actually we are engaging with them as we speak.
And they're listening to you?
Well, I would like to verify.
Okay.
And make sure. No? I mean, one thing is to listen, but the other thing is you want to verify. But so far they have opened their doors to us, and we have to be fair about this. We are engaged in this. The killings, as you rightly said, we have, and I mentioned earlier, we are actually logging. Every 3 months, we produce reports called Global Horizontal Note on Sudan about every violation. There are 7 grave violations that the United Nations looks at. Everything that happens to children. Mostly we concentrate in the Darfur and the Blue Nile and Nuba areas, but now because of this specific situation, we're also looking at what's happening in the country. So those reports are being compiled, and we are engaged with the National Council for Child Welfare. I can assure you of this. This is happening. And again, Sudanese police, we have in every Sudanese police station in a number of the states, family and child protection units. UNICEF built it, and actually we also have a hotline where families can actually go, so children are not put in regular jails of adults, but they have a specific areas. The impact of the political crisis to children, actually the impact is to communities and families. To be honest, even though I would not want children to be exposed and to be at the forefront of, but Sudanese children also have shown amazing creativity and passion and love for their country. Civic education is something that we are actually looking at as the curriculum changes. Sudanese curriculum, by the way, is not as good as it used to be. It needs to be revised. The role of a girl and a woman is not appropriate in our view. And so we're hoping the next education minister will look into this curriculum. I mean, I come from, I was born in a country where the Sudanese curriculum for Bakht al-Rida and Al-Hantobi were the examples. You know that's not the case anymore. So all of this needs to be now. Education is the basics. If you don't have education right, the country will not reach its potential. So this is one of the, Sudan education is not free. Even public education that's supposed to be free is not free. Families are paying more from their pocket to support government institutions than the government pays. So we need to change this. You're right, children are leaving school because they cannot have feeding. That's why WFP is working on massive, as much as they can, feeding systems. Actually, we're working closely on also finding ways. Mujahideen actually is a partner with UNICEF in a number of areas in the country. So, and actually recently they were even stopped and we lobbied with the governor so that they can continue their work. So just it's good to see also that...
they're being stopped again, by the way. It's going
Okay, Matthew, what do you want to add? I will hold it for you.
It's okay. Not a great deal to add. I heard a comment about loud and clear on livestock and the importance of livestock. Livestock in Sudan, as you know, livestock is like a bank account. If you have money to put aside, you buy sheep, you buy cattle. It has always been that way. Livestock will always be a critical component of the agricultural of production in Sudan. I'm not suggesting for a minute that would change. What has to change are some of the policies around livestock. When you look at countries in the region, in East Africa, the countries that have done well are the countries that have invested in the value added to be had in having their own abattoirs, in being able to freeze meat and sell meat through butcheries, not to sell meat as live animals, not to ship your live animals and stock countries in the region so that they have their own livestock now and they no longer need your farming capacity. This is a mistake. Those policies need to change. The government knows that. The Ministry of Agriculture knows that. The Ministry of Livestock knows that. Believe me, they know it. But it hasn't been the policy in the past. There needs to be policies reviewed. It's very clear. And we continue to work with those organizations, those ministries, but also those organizations that work with us on agriculture and food security. On malnutrition in the East, Abdullah covered it. There is an enormous amount of work that takes place, particularly in the East. But I want to be honest when I tell you it's no longer just an issue of the West and the East. There are horrific malnutrition indicators in Nile State today. Nile State.
Actually, northern state as well.
And
Pockets.
northern state.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, but the Nile State in particular, this is an area that never faced this crisis in the past, but is facing it today. You are seeing indicators across the 18 states of the country, in states where we never saw these things before. Like I said, we are used to seeing issues in states in the periphery. Okay? Whether we like it or not, the periphery has frequently been forgotten when it comes to development from the time of the British and the British Mandate. Forever. We are used to seeing those issues there. Now we are seeing it countrywide. So the issues on things like malnutrition are a much bigger crisis today than they've been before. There are aspects of our work that look at social behavior change, Abdullah gave the perfect example. People in the East don't eat eggs. People in Red Sea State don't eat fish. Wallahi. You have the greatest source of cheap protein available to an entire population. They don't eat fish.
Neither chicken.
They don't eat chicken.
Yes.
They won't eat eggs. Eggs, the cheapest and healthiest form of protein. They don't eat eggs. These are things that need to change. These are things that need to change, and we are working to change them through education, through social behavioral change. Dr. Farouk. Dr. Farouk,
Yes,
I got your name
yeah.
right, sorry. Thank you. Money is important. Money is important. But the power and capacity in the Sudanese diaspora is important. Not only the money. 10,000 doctors or more registered in the United States of America from Sudan.
More than
Proba-
2,000 consultant here. Yeah.
Probably similar numbers in the UK.
Yeah.
Yeah? More.
Yeah.
The Gulf.
Yeah.
You think Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates,
Yeah.
Kuwait, Bahrain can work without the Sudanese diaspora in those countries? There is so much energy, capacity. You talk about capacity building. The capacity exists. The political and social changes, I can understand, need to be in place. But people can also come home and work. We've seen it. Some of the best organizations we work with are organizations that are sponsored by, supported by, capacity built by Sudanese diaspora. So money is important. I'm never going to say it's not. I mean, let's be very frank. But the capacity can be Sudanese capacity as well. We have to always remember, I mean, I have to be humble in what the World Food Programme has achieved in Sudan in 50 years. In 50 years, the fact that we still have to be there should make us embarrassed as an international community. That the United Nations World Food Programme still needs to be in Sudan after 50 years is embarrassing. It means something went wrong. Some of the things that went wrong relate to conflict internally in the country. There were decades of war between the South and the rest of, or between the North and the South. Those are realities. But the fact that today there is such a paucity of development assistance going into Sudan is a problem. Because if we are going to get out of a dependency of aid and on aid, that we need to look at aid differently. But that's as relevant to the Sudanese society and the Sudanese government as it is for international donors as well. Donors need to look at Sudan differently. They need to invest in Sudan differently. The private sector needs to invest in Sudan, and that's a whole different beast, because we have the long-term issue of Sudan being listed by the US as a state sponsor of terrorism. Until Sudan is delisted from that list, significant financial development through the private sector, through international investment, is not going to happen. Until the World Bank and the IMF have their arrears paid and real development funding can come from the international financial institutions, until that happens, real change is not going to happen. But don't think it means that we're not doing something. In the school season, when we have children in schools, we're feeding 900,000 children a school meal every day. 900,000 children get a school meal. Now, I wish that was 4 million. I wish I had the funds and the food to be feeding 4 million children at school. I wish I had the funds to feed even more, because as Abdullah said, 3 million children in Sudan don't go to school every day. Exactly. So we are doing something, but we have to recognize it's a small amount. But the answer is not us. The answer is the government of Sudan. What's the percentage of the former government's budget that went to education?
public expenditure between 6 and 9%, GDP about 1.2%,
1.2%.
and the average in the region is about 3 to 4%.
Yes. No, nobody got to see that budget line. If the auditors could see it, then they'd tell you. But we on the promises, you know, we feed 3 million families, vulnerable families, 3 million people from vulnerable families, day in, day out in Sudan, today. But the issue is 3 million is no longer the number.
Yes.
5.7 million people in Sudan today are categorized as food insecure. 5.7. When we are feeding school kids and the other families through our other programs, we reach around 4 million. There's a 1.7 we're not reaching, and the government's not reaching them. And that number's rising because of the economic crisis. So the situation is getting worse, not better right now, in the short term.
Okay. شكرا جزيلا يا جماعة. I have to stop here for several reasons. These people are, he came straight from airport, right?
Yeah.
From the airport. Abdullah arrived yesterday. They have a full day tomorrow, and then they're leaving. And actually they are here, as they told you, they're going to meet ministers to argue for more fund for us. So I think the message came across very well. We have to do our part, which we have to. And also, I'm very grateful. We have to do lots of work to get these things done. Thank you very much. I know your time is very short. And to squeeze it here in this place, thank you very much, Sheikh Abdul Mahmoud, Professor Hussein, Tanweer, thank you very much. She has to carry all these things by herself because we need to fit it around you, because otherwise the university is far away. But because this room is being booked and also of their time, I really have to stop it here. But while we're leaving, you can still catch something from them. So we're going to hang you around. But thank you very much. Could you please join me? Thank everyone. Also Larissa from the UNICEF Sudan. And the UNICEF UK, Kate, there's a lot of people very involved. You don't see them in the front. Thank you very, very much. We all appreciate it, and we thank you for your time. But that's the best way we could have done. But whatever time they gave us, we have to use it. Thank you very much. We have to leave it here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Abdullah. I appreciate this.
So please remember, if we all help and do a little bit, it will make a big difference.